Whether it's video games, movies, or books, I personally love when the media I'm consuming thinks outside of the box. When it tries to break the so-called fourth wall or has a unique spin to it. In this video I want to show you 10 of these books with unique concepts and twists that will blow your mind. House of Leaves. Probably the most well-known book on this list. House of Leaves became famous for being the first commercially successful example of so-called ergodic literature, describing a form of text which requires a non-trivial effort of the reader to traverse it. In the case of House of Leaves, the text presentation, order and design become part of the author's vision and expression. Some pages contain just a single word. At times the reader has to turn the book on its head to continue reading. Sometimes we are switching between different narrators or layers. Sometimes we are reading footnotes, footnotes, or footnotes. House of Leaves is one of the most interactive books out there, in that it requires of the reader a certain amount of attention and willingness to become part of its interactive reading experience. The story itself also contains multiple layers of narration. The top layer follows the first-person narrative of young tattoo artist Johnny Trant, who's in search for a new apartment to live in. He gets wind of a vacant apartment formerly lived in by a recently deceased blind elderly man called Zampano. In his apartment, Johnny finds a mysterious manuscript, the so-called Navidson Record, which acts as the book's second layer. At some point, the manuscript describes a film documentary about the Navidson family who used to live on Ash Tree Lane. This documentary, then described in manuscript, acts as the book's third layer. Over the years, House of Leaves gained a cult following, as it's an interactive and deeply layered reading experience. And it also invites the reader to start the experience over and over again, in search for new clues and breadcrumbs they might have missed out on preceding read-throughs. Gadsby. This book does not contain the letter E. Yes, you've heard that right. Gadsby is a 50,000 word long novel which leaves out the most commonly used letter in the English alphabet. Not in the sense that it just prints words without the letter E, rather, the author avoided all words that contains this letter altogether. Works of fiction with this concept are called lipograms, and Gadsby is one of the longest and earliest lipograms out there. The book was written in the mid-1930s, and to achieve this goal the author had to tie down the E key on his typewriter to avoid slip-ups. According to him, the most difficult task was to avoid the ed suffix of past tense verbs, like in I walked. He would try to circumvent these instances by using a lot of constructions with do and did, like I did walk, for example. He surprisingly still managed to describe difficult sceneries and objects despite this obstacle. For example, a detailed description of a horse-drawn fire engine is made without using the words horse, fire, or engine. As you can see, the author went to great lengths to still tell a coherent story. In it, we're following 50-year-old John Gadsby, who's alarmed by the decline of his hometown Brandon Hills, and therefore rallies the city's youth to build civic spirit and improve the living standards of his community. The book starts around 1906 and continues throughout the First World War, the Prohibition era, and Warren G. Harding's administration as President of the United States. As author, Ernest Wright had been so very imaginative with the English language and grammar, the book therefore reads a bit messy at times, and the language is a bit forced. Still, Gadsby is a literary unicorn. It was unique for its time and is still one of the very few lipograms of this size and ambition out there. Pale Fire. This book is written by the same author as the famous novel Lolita, Russian writer Vladimir Nabokov. I'm a little bit hesitant to call this a book in a common sense, because Pale Fire is in its core a poem of the same name, 999 lines long, written by a fictional poet called John Shade. Pale Fire, the book then, as many others, has a foreword, index and commentary attached to it, written by yet another fictional character called Charles Kinbert, who used to be John Shade's colleague, editor and neighbor. Kinbert is a scholar and known on campus as a bit of a shady figure, but how far would he go? What secret is he hiding? It is only throughout this commentary and interpretation of John Shade's poem that Kinbert reveals perhaps more than he should be. Pale Fire is seen by many as a masterpiece, as it's essentially a character study hidden within the oftentimes most boring parts of many other books, the foreword, the footnotes and the commentary. The book can be read in many different ways, either in a linear or a non-linear fashion. You can read a poem line by line and put Kinbert's commentary next to it, or read it like a normal book, maybe only occasionally jumping back to the lines he's referring to. Pale Fire is a deeply layered work of art, as the poem itself changes meaning and the reader's perception of it throughout the book. And Kinbert's commentary reveals layer by layer more of his intentions and character. It's an interesting concept, one that I've never seen done or explored before, and one that Nabokov is really capable of delivering on here. 253. This novel has been on the internet since 1996. For years it was only to be found on the author's website though, but after getting picked up by internet hype, it found its way into this print version. The book essentially tells the story of a fictional tube ride happening in 1995, going 3 stops from Embankment Station up to Elephant and Castle right in the heart of London. A tube train usually consists of 7 cars, and each of these cars has 36 seats. This means that an ideally filled tube train in which each passenger has a seat and no one needs to stand carries 252 passengers. Adding the driver to it, we're counting 253. In this book by the same name, every passenger on this tube ride gets a little literary portrait consisting of exactly 253 words. You find out about the passengers' outward appearances, what they're thinking and doing, as well as inside information about them. This way, the author is taking us back and showing us within the 7.5-minute long tube ride what life in the mid-90s in London was like, all portrayed in 253 words for 253 passengers. The book is not really following an overarching story, but it's perfect for those of you who love sitting in a cafe or park to watch other people and wonder about their lives, where they came from and where they go to, what their relationships between each other might be. It's ideal to be consumed in small chunks, which makes it a great book for the bedside table or, let's face it, next to the toilet, and I mean that in the best way possible. Hopscotch. This book tells the story of Horacio Oliveira, an Argentinian writer living in Paris with his mistress La Maga. They surround themselves with the sophisticated bohème of the city, an intricate and tightly knit circle which calls itself the club. After an incident happened to La Maga, Oliveira is forced to move back to Buenos Aires, and the book follows him on this adventure back to his roots. So far so good, the story already sounds fairly enticing, but what makes this book so unique and special is the way it's constructed. In its very own and unique way, Hopscotch can be interpreted and read as many books at once, but 2 books above all. It consists of 155 chapters in total, and the reader is then invited to choose between 2 possibilities of reading it. It can be read chronologically, from chapter 1 to 56, at which point the story officially ends. Chapters 57 to 155 are seen as the second book, which officially starts at chapter 73, and then asks the reader to jump around or hopscotch between the chapters, even going through parts from the first book again, giving them a new meaning in the story's now extended context. As you can see here, directly after chapter 73, you are asked to read the first 2 chapters of the book again, and then it's all over the place from there. Despite its conceptual structure, the book carries a multi-layered meaning and message within. It's deeply philosophical. It explores and questions themes of love, liberty, and life. It also carries heavy allusions to jazz and political interests. It's a really fascinating work of penmanship and one that you should definitely check out. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. This is a book about you trying to read a book called If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler, but thereby getting distracted by a wide assortment of other novels. Released in 1979, this postmodernist narrative is a so-called frame story. Each of its 10 chapters is divided into 2 sections. The first part of each chapter is written in second person, meaning it's speaking for you as the reader, addressing what you did or are doing, and it describes the process you will go through in the attempt to read the forthcoming second half. This second half then is usually a book within a book. It consists of 10 different novels from all sorts of genres, writing styles, or subject matters. The aforementioned first half of each chapter written in second person still tells a coherent story. The varying different novels you subsequently go through then make for a playful, modernist puzzle, as the Telegraph once put it. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler is very meta. It plays with the expectations of how a book should work, and it puts a creative spin on the whole medium of books as well as the process of reading in and of itself. Cain's Jawbone. This is a murder mystery, the likes of which you have never read before, and has been described as one of the hardest, most beguiling word puzzles ever published. So far, only 4 people have ever solved this puzzle, twice in 1935, shortly after the book's original release, and then twice more in recent years. It was first published in 1934 as part of the Torquemada Puzzle Book, a miscellaneous collection of all sorts of different puzzles and riddles. £15 at the time were offered to the first person able to solve Cain's Jawbone, which would be equivalent to about £1,200 today. Unfortunately, shortly after its publication, the book was lost for many decades, but resurfaced in 2018, got a subsequent re-release with a new prize money of £1,000. Comedian John Finnemore eventually solved the book over a 4-month period during the first COVID lockdown. Its solution, though, has never been made public. Cain's Jawbone is essentially a 100-page book, but the pages are in the wrong order. To solve the puzzle, the reader must determine the correct order of the pages first, and also correctly predict the names of the murderers and victims within the story. To do this, there are all sorts of clues hidden within the text, namely a large number of quotations, cryptic references, puns, and other word games to lead the reader on the right or the wrong path. There's a special edition of the book that therefore comes in a bit of an unusual format, as it's printed on cards to make figuring out the correct order easier. This more classical version right here is in a typical book format, but you're incentivized to cut out the pages and start playing around with them. So if you're the type of person who loves solving puzzles, this might actually be a really cool thing to check out. Dancing Lessons for the Advanced in Age. This is a book about a rambling old drunk man speaking to a group of sunbathing women. The young ladies remind him a bit too much of lovers' past, so the elderly man begins telling the women his life story. We learn of his amorous adventures, of scandals, military adventures and domestic feuds, of life back in the day and what has become of society society ever since. It's not the story itself, though, that gives this book a spot on this list of conceptual books, but rather that even though it's a relatively short affair, as you can see here, it's written in one long sentence. Its author, Czech writer Bohumil Hrabal, developed a unique method which he termed palavering, whereby his characters ramble on in monologues for hours on end. Published in 1964, Dancing Lessons for the Advanced in Age has since been described by critics as a humorous and breathless affair. It's partially a drunken boast, a soul-rendering confession, and a metaphysical poem on the nature of love and time. Given that you can finish it in an afternoon, it's probably worth checking out. Gödel, Escher, Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid. This is an intimidatingly thick and dense book, very hard to summarize and therefore definitely one of a kind. The title refers to our three protagonists, mathematician Kurt Gödel, artist MC Escher, and classical musical composer Johann Sebastian Bach. The subtitle of this book, The Eternal Golden Braid, refers to the notion of strange loops, as the author calls them, which is his explanation for consciousness and free will. Strange loops are an interaction between levels, which the top level reaches back down towards the bottom level and influences it, while at the same time being itself determined by the bottom level. Sounds complicated? Well, you've definitely seen loops like this before. For example, in optical illusions like this one or MC Escher's works of art. The book describes and defines this concept of recursion and discusses its application in computer science, art, music, biology, and other fields like artificial intelligence. The author thereby dives deep into Gödel's incompleteness theorem, Escher's endless loops and optical illusions, and Bach's canons and fugues, as they help to various degrees to illustrate the characteristics of consciousness. The book then alternates between chapters of scientific theory and fictional dialogues between characters such as Achilles and a tortoise. This might be one of the most dense and mind-bending books you will ever read in your life. You don't need to be a mathematician to understand it, but you need to be open to dig through about 100 pages of number theory. It's crazy to think that just one person alone wrote this, as every page creates another link, another reference, another loop inside the book, thereby creating one big reference to the overarching theme of strange loops. I think I'm in a strange loop myself. S. This book is written and conceived by Doug Dorst and the J.J. Abrams, creator of TV series like Lost and Fringe, as well as director of films like Super 8 or 2 Star Wars movies. As with a few other books on this list, it tells yet another deeply layered and conceptual story within a story. The book is designed in its visual appearance to look like an old copy of a fictional novel called Ship of Theseus, written by fictional author V.M. Strucker, published in 1949. The pages are designed to look worn and yellow, with library stamps and stains on them. This Ship of Theseus stand is the book's first layer. It can be read in and of itself like any normal book and tells the story of an amnesiac on a journey to discover his true self. The aforementioned fictional author of this book, V.M. Strucker, is a man of mystery though. Ship of Theseus marks his last novel before his mysterious death, and his enigmatic life is considered one of the literary world's greatest mysteries, enshrouded by conspiracy theories and strange rumors. A second layer and storyline then takes place in the book's margins. Here we can find a dialogue of Eric and Jen, 2 students of Laguna Verde High School who borrowed the Ship of Theseus from their school's library and want to find clues of V.M. Strucker's life and death hidden deep within the text of his last book. In the physical version, you can also find maps, hidden postcards and other supplementary material tucked between its pages that give the whole book a very lively and real feel to it, even though everything is fictional. If you're a fan of J.J. Abrams' more mysterious works like the TV show Lost, you will absolutely love this book, as it has the same ring of mystery and story building to it. Many reviewers also described it as the most intricate novel they had ever read, and truly worth of the hype. As with all the books on this list, I've put a link to it in the description below. I would really love to welcome you back on my channel in the future, so thank you for subscribing. And if you're now in the mood for more strangeness and weirdness, why not check out one of my other videos, like this one where I talk about my 32 biggest life lessons from 32 years of weird life. Thank you and see you next time. Ciao.